An elderly man, slapped down in street, ignored. 30 minutes later, a Black Hawk helicopter landed right in the middle of the neighborhood. Not a drill. Not a movie. The special ops commander stepped out. No shouting, just one question. Who struck a veteran? You're hearing a part of a veteran story, no news channel ever told. But justice for veterans does not stay silent. A slap that seems small struck the memory of an entire generation. And if you think this story is made up, stay with us, because the truth is harder to believe than fiction. Frank Delaney, 84 years old, he walked slowly along Main Street's sidewalk, holding a paper-wrapped loaf of bread, his old military coat worn at the shoulders, his shoes worn thin over 10 years. No one recognized him. No one knew he had survived 3 major campaigns, awarded 2 medals for pulling comrades out of gunfire. Now, he lives in a battered trailer on the edge of town. No wife, no friends, just a rusted radio and faded photos of soldiers on the wall. Frank didn't need to be remembered. He only wanted to quietly buy his loaf of bread and go home. But today, that street wouldn't let him be. Frank's home had no number, just an old trailer sitting in a barren field by an abandoned railway. Inside, time seemed frozen. A military map pinned with rusty tacks. A pistol with no bullets resting on a table. On the shelf, 3 medals covered in dust. A letter from his son, written from base 8 years ago. He still read it every night, as if it had just arrived yesterday. Frank lived on veteran benefits. Not enough for medication, not enough to fix the heater. He wore extra layers when he slept. People looked at him and saw a poor old man. No one saw someone who once kept a whole platoon alive. And the most painful part was, no one even asked if he was still alive. Frank walked slowly past Harley's bar. Outside, a group of bikers gathered, laughing loud, rock music blaring onto the sidewalk. A luxury motorcycle was angled right across the path. He stepped aside, but the frayed hem of his coat brushed against the handlebar. Just a touch. Just an old coat. But it sparked something. Chad Walker, a tattooed guy in a skull bandana, spun around. "Watch where you're going, old man." No time for an answer. He raised his hand and slapped. Frank collapsed onto the pavement. The loaf of bread burst apart. Blood dripped from his lip, and not a single voice spoke up. Frank lay sideways on the curb, blood from his mouth soaking into the same coat he wore on the battlefield. The bread smashed to pieces. One shoe had slipped off, but the worst part was the silence. A young woman pulled out her phone. She recorded not to help but for TikTok. A man shook his head and walked away. Another young man snickered. Old guys always think they're heroes. No one helped him up. No one asked his name. No one cared about the pain in his eyes as he stared quietly at the sky. Frank said nothing. He sat up, trembling, and began doing something no one expected. Frank pulled himself onto a bench near the bus stop. No one helped. No one stopped him. Breathing heavily, his hands trembling, he reached into his inner pocket. A scratched-up old flip phone fell out worn, discolored, but still had battery. He dialed a familiar number without hesitation, without looking. Each button press, like the heartbeat of a past coming back to life. The faded screen lit up with the words, Eagle 6, priority channel only. He held the phone to his ear, his voice raspy. Situation. Code yellow. Sector 17. Immediate response. No one around him knew what that meant. No one knew. They had just heard a call. Only one person in the country was authorized to answer. And that person was already on the way. Chad Walker still stood outside the bar, arms folded smugly. He recounted his victory, laughing. That old fart dropped like a sack of rice. Kept glaring at me too. His buddies burst out laughing, popped open beers. No one noticed Frank anymore. No one asked why he was still sitting there, not leaving. Then, one guy stopped laughing. He saw something strange, a black dot in the sky. Hey, you guys hear that? A low, distant rumble, like metal grinding through wind. Chad squinted up. Probably a police chopper. Who cares? What he didn't know was, what was coming wasn't police, wasn't news. It was the response of a system once commanded by Frank's son. The sound grew louder, heavier. Wind whipped newspapers off the sidewalk. Pedestrians turned, uneasy. A Black Hawk helicopter descended from the sky. Rotor blades screamed, shaking the ground like a soft quake. A dust-covered black SUV surged down Main Street, halting at the curb. 4 doors opened in unison. A tactical unit emerged, black uniforms, gleaming armor, no police insignias. At the center, a man with a steel-hard expression, Colonel Ryan Delaney. He didn't speak, just glanced at his father still sitting quietly at the bus stop. Then turned to the crowd, now holding its breath. No one realized a slap had struck the nerve of an entire military family. Colonel Ryan Delaney stepped forward with decisive strides through the gusts stirred up by the helicopter. His eyes scanned the area but stopped, right where the old man sat. Frank remained still, eyes steady. Not afraid, not surprised, just tired. Ryan knelt down. Father and son faced each other amid dust, silence, and memory. "You got here fast," Frank said, voice faint. "For you, it's always urgent," Ryan replied. No hug, no tears, just a touch on the shoulder like a signal between two warriors who've seen too much. Ryan stood up, his face hardened, once again. He pulled out an earpiece, spoke into his mic. "Confirm target. Establish perimeter. No one leaves the area." This battle had no bullets, but it demanded honor. Ryan Delaney faced the bar. One signal, his unit spread out, sealing the area tight. No shouting, no sirens, just presence and silence. One soldier stepped toward the biker group, his voice firm, not loud, but crisp like a battlefield command. "Who assaulted veteran Frank Delaney?" Chad Walker froze. His eyes darted. No one stood with him. A girl stepped back. One of his friends turned away. I didn't know who he was." "Now you do," the soldier replied, pulling out the cuffs. Chad took a step back, but Ryan's gaze held him like iron, and in that moment, he realized he had struck something sacred in America. A father, a soldier, a symbol. Police cruisers arrived late, their sirens out of place in an atmosphere already transformed. 3 officers stepped out, hands on their belts by habit. But the moment they saw the Special Ops Unit and the emblem on Ryan's sleeve, they paused. Sergeant Harris, the highest-ranking officer, approached and glanced at Ryan for a second. No introductions, no request for ID. He simply spoke into his radio. "That's Colonel Ryan Delaney, son of former Chief Mechanic Frank Delaney. We're not in charge here." Ryan said nothing, just turned his head slightly toward Chad Walker. Sergeant Harris gave a nod. Chad was handcuffed. No rights read, no resistance needed. His arrogance crumbled onto the sidewalk. And at that same moment, every eye on the street shifted not toward Ryan, but toward the old man at the bus stop. Frank stood up slowly. The blood on his lip had dried. His torn coat still carried the dust of the street, but his back was now straight. The crowd stood silent. Even the ops team froze. Even the helicopter wind seemed to hush. He looked around, then spoke low, steady, and real. "I've been shot. I once lay under enemy fire for 13 hours on the Kuwait border. I know what pain is. But the pain today isn't on my cheek. It's in the eyes of those who saw me fall and looked away." Frank didn't cry, but the whole street held its breath. "I don't need anyone to take revenge for me. I just need one thing, that next time you see injustice, don't stay silent." After Frank's words, Main Street fell into a vacuum of sound. A woman stepped forward shyly, offering him a bottle of water. A teenager pulled down his cap, whispered, I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were." A little boy raised his hand in a military salute. No one taught him. He just did it by instinct. And then, from the far end of the street, a quiet procession approached. They wore old coats, silver hair, walking sticks, on their chests faded pins. Veterans, They formed a line along the sidewalk, faces solemn, no words, just standing talus, if saluting their old commander returning home. Colonel Ryan stepped beside his father. The Black Hawk's rotor winds billowed his coat, but he didn't move an inch. Ryan looked around, then spoke. Some think a single slap ends a moment, but sometimes a slap is the wake-up call of a nation's memory. He turned to Chad now, being loaded into the police cruiser. You didn't slap an old man. You hit a man who once kept American soldiers alive on foreign soil, so you could stand here and laugh. Frank placed a hand gently on his son's shoulder. That's enough, Ryan. We don't need punishment. We just need to be remembered. And he turned away, slowly, step by step between rows of veterans raising their hands in salute. Frank walked slowly down the sidewalk. The Black Hawk faded behind rooftops, but people's hearts had just opened. This was no longer a story about an old man. It was a warning. History doesn't sit in textbooks. It lives in people like Frank. We've forgotten them, those who gave their youth, their honor, and sometimes their future just to protect us. A slap didn't bring Frank down, but it exposed society's indifference. Justice for veterans doesn't make films to tell stories. We tell them to awaken. If you've ever walked past someone like Frank without looking back, today is your second chance. Comment, "I see you, Frank," and share this video so that no veteran ever has to fade away in silence.